And I just don't want to compete with people. I'll take that whole public land and I'll cross 99% of it off, and I'll be just looking at these little patches where I think people don't go. And you don't think about how to hunt, I need scrapes, I need rub lines. Just put all that out the window. Think about where would he hide and find that. And then find his sign there, go in and kill him.
What has been one of the biggest factors for you for finding and targeting mature bucks in your area of the country?
The biggest factor for finding and getting on them is bedding, is finding their bedding areas. But I guess beyond that, I got to find the buck. There isn't a big buck on every property. So seeing them is a huge thing for me because you never really have that, I know for sure thing until you get eyes on them or get a picture of them or something. And there's something about that, when I get eyes on them, it's like, okay, you're dead. This is it. You get that confidence feeling like, okay, now it's going to happen. And then I'll hunt down an area. But I spread myself out real thin over a large area. And, at first in the season, unless I'm onto something from over the summers, I'm just hitting a lot of target areas, looking for that sign, looking for those huge early rubs. And, and then once maybe I find those huge early rubs, then I start focusing on that area. There's something in here. Then I want to see it, get eyes on it. And I might still hop around and look other places because I don't know if that's happening at night or what's going on. But once I get eyes on them, that's a huge factor.
Now, when you say eyes on, this is something that you kind of brought up a little bit in some of the Q&A and also your seminars with Mario, was not necessarily always using trail cameras. But when you put eyes on, you're talking about doing observation sits typically?
Observation sits on foot, from a truck.
Okay.
However you got to do it. You look back and ripping apart my top 15 bucks, I think it's like 80 or 90% of them, I was hunting the buck I shot. And I had previous seen it. Probably, I think it's like 60 or 70% I hunted for multiple years before I shot him. So, there's just that confidence. He's in there. Now you can go in there and figure out there's only so many hiding spots. People are like, well, he doesn't move in daylight. No, they do. There's some place in there you're missing. There's something that you don't have. And if you have that mindset that it's like you're playing war, and they know you're coming, and they know you're after him, they're going to find, where isn't he going to look? I'm going to hide. And put yourself in his shoes. If I was out here and I was a deer, where would I hide on me? And I try to find that spot where nobody would look. Still has the features that a deer needs. Still has like an edge or a point or something, but it's in some obscure place where nobody'd look. I think the biggest thing with hunters is even if you give them all the education, is they just want to believe it's the most remote. And I'm starting to find a lot of these public properties, you go back 2 miles, and that's where you find the most pressure. And at least the most intelligent pressure. So you start seeing good hunters there who are in the right spots and stuff, and you start thinking, well, the buck that's making these rubs or the buck I seen, or, if he was living here, he'd be dead. So where's the niche? And, and sometimes you find out that they're living on the private and coming to the public, and you ain't got a chance. You just got to move on. And you get a lot of guys that will just sit on that piece of public on the fence line waiting, and they'll never have a chance because they're putting too much scent there waiting. But they're probably not the only one waiting, and there's just no chance. And you just, cut ties with a deer you can't kill because you're wasting time. And, just keep moving until you get on one you can kill.
And one thing that you've brought up multiple times, and it always seems like overlooked spots always kind of comes up in conversation, and on the forum as well, overlooked spots. And that's something that we've taken into consideration a lot more in the Southeast where we're at, especially in Alabama and Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi where we hunt at. That taking into consideration, especially when it comes to like overlooked spots and trying to get visuals on the deer, is it sometimes just not complicating as much as in if there's thick cover or some kind of obstruction close to an access point that guys are trying to walk around and go past it, that could be a likely spot you could find a mature buck in those areas.
If it's got cover that could hold a buck, I'm going to go look at it. And I'm going to specifically go look at overlooked spots where I think when we talk about this, people think, well, I'll keep that in mind that they could be there. And they still go to the remote spots and stuff like that. And I just don't want to compete with people. I'll take that whole public land and I'll cross 99% of it off, and I'll be just looking at these little patches where I think people don't go. And those are going to be the first places I go. And if I end up in one of those remote places, it's because of what I saw. So I'm right away going to those overlooked spots. Mm-hmm. Think about this. You get into these solid pine patches and even if it's hardwood or whatever, and it gets a little mature and has understory, only where the sun breaks through, if there's a hole, a tree fell down or something, is there any kind of, real good green, good food. And deer don't just eat cornfields. They don't just eat acorns and stuff. They eat vast varieties of plants we couldn't even name, Any place where there's a lot of green, right? A little bit of sun hitting. Where does that happen? In those big forests. Right along the road where the sunlight hits the edges. They do a lot of feeding right alongside roads. And then they got cover there, too, from that same plant life to live. And then they got a barrier. They got to have that edge. Because what a mature whitetail needs is an escape. So he needs to, monitor one way, have an escape the other, and if it's something comes from that way, he still has an escape the monitor way, right?
Absolutely.
So they will take and they'll use the road, they'll use the thick cover, they'll use the opening seeing into that hardwoods, and they'll use the wind, and they'll use the thermals, and they'll find some spot along that road where nobody goes because it's not near a parking lot. It's not near a parking spot. A lot of times you'll see a canal along those roads, right? Right on the other side of that canal. I mean, you literally got to walk half a mile to get over. Just as much as those guys that are going to the middle, competing for those spots. You got to go way around to get at him. And you got to get out around from away with the angle, with the wind and stuff. It ain't easy. It's not like we're not walking the distance or doing the work. But we're hunting where the deer are, regardless of whether it looks stupid or not. It's the whole dating a fat chick theory. For those that didn't hear that, it's fat chicks are fun. They're not stuck up, and they're just happy to be around you. You know, but you don't want your friends to see you there, right? Well, you get in this tree, you're like, I sure hope nobody sees me here. I feel embarrassed hunting here. But those are the type of spots I shoot my biggest bucks.
Oh. Yeah, and like you said, just like the whole fat girl analogy, a lot of people are like, they almost feel embarrassed when they find that sign and they bump a buck. Or how often do you hear from guys that they hike back to their truck after going super far and they bump a buck 60 yards from their truck?
Right.
It happened last year. I was at an overlook spot, intentionally watching the parking area. Now, this is on a firearm hunt next to a big clear cut that's about 2.5 years old. A lot of broom sedge grass growing up. Pines are about 2.5, 3 feet tall. And you'd always see, it was on a gated road, and when you walked in, you'd always find big buck tracks crossing right there. I mean, 60 yards from the truck. So I'm like, I'm going to get 200 yards from the truck where I can see all the way back to the truck and just watch that area. And all my buddies, we put 4 trucks at the gate. All my buddies walked 3/4 of a mile in. I sat that morning, saw 2 bucks, passed 2 bucks, had a really nice 8-point come from the truck. I have no idea where he came from, but next thing I know, he's 60 yards from me walking right towards a nice 8-point. Filmed him, sent him to the buddies, and they're all like, man, why don't I hear gunshots? I'm like, well, we know there's bigger deer here. Let's try to figure out if one of these bigger bucks come through, and they never did that day. But when my buddies walked back to their truck, I could watch them, and they could see me up in my stand. And again, it's one of those goofy spots, said dating the fat girl. And when they got to their truck, there was a strip of pines, not 15 yards wide, about 30 yards long, next to the trucks they're parked to. When they started their truck up and started talking, a buck got up out of that tree line, 40 yards from him, and slipped over onto some private land and got out. And I'd text him, hey, you just had a buck right behind you. Y'all never knew it. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm filming him and filming you at your truck as he's walking away. Again, it wasn't a shooter, but it shows you how well they're accustomed to, like, if people are walking in, if they can hold tight and they're comfortable kind of sitting low and you don't make eye contact or bump them, it almost seems like in those areas, even if they smell you, they're like, after, I guess, just the conditioning, they're used to people not walking in there. They may smell you, but I'm just going to hold tight, and then once you get out, then they're going to ease off.
Even if sometimes they don't even ease off. They just get so used to it. I find a lot of spots where there's really good buck beds just watching a parking lot or watching an axis. And one of the very biggest bucks that I ever shot with a bow, field dressed, it bottomed out a 300-pound scale. And they're bigger up north, right? But
oh God, I can't comprehend that, but okay.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like that big dude at school. You're like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Remember that guy?
Yeah, 6'5", about 340. Yeah.
Right. But that buck, I was watching him right next to a parking lot, And it's the main parking lot, like one of the two main parking lots of this big public area. And it has a main axis that goes out like a mile. It's got like this logging road that goes out like a mile, and then it spreads out, right? And everybody just follows that logging road, you know. And then there's some private land along the, you know, edges, and it goes out like it, like kind of like it's an access easement for hunters to get back there. But it's wide enough you could hunt it. You know, like it's, maybe the easement's 100 yards across. You know, so you get in there, you're kind of close to the border, but I'm watching this buck get up on the private land right alongside the road, right alongside the parking lot, and come out and stage by the parking lot, and literally sometimes walk right through the parking lot between the cars and across the road, and nobody's at the parking lot at gray light. You know, so there was two bucks. There was a 140 class 10-pointer and this one, and they're both coming out of that bedding, staging at one spot, making a scrape there, like competing against each other. And when I got everything right, I went in there and shot that thing, and literally the whole parking lot was full of cars, and minutes before shooting it, people came out of their cars and walked up the access pass 50 yards from me. I mean, you shoot those things right underneath people. People think that those deer got to be, you know, like are afraid of people or way back. Where they don't like scent is in their bedding area. They are like, they're okay with it being on the access route. That they're used to that. They're used to people occasionally walk around the cornfield or across the acorn flat or whatever, and they'll still move there kind of sometimes, you know. But, you know, I'll get a lot of people that'll tell me that, you know, every place I show up in my woods, I run into a tree stand. You know, it's the right spot. It's got the point. It's going into the bedding, blah, 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 but there's a tree stand there, and there's somebody hunting there. Would you still hunt there if they're not there? And I have to tell them that, you know, you could probably still kill a good deer there. But when I look at my stats, all my top 15 bucks that were all over 5 years old, every one of them was shot in a spot where there's no sign of any hunter before. The majority of them was the very first time I hunted there. So, you know, those bucks figure you out. That literally, if you look at how many hunters are out there, look at rut, how many hunters are out there? If they got up and chased does around, they'd be dead. They wouldn't make it to 6 years old. So if they're 6 years old, they're an incredible survival machine. And you got to look at that like, where would you go if you're an incredible survival machine? If you were the smartest buck out there, how would you survive? And you don't think about how to hunt, you know, I need scrapes, I need rub lines. Just put all that out the window. Think about where would he hide and find that. And then find his sign there, go in and kill him.